Welcome to Ewtn's continuing live coverage of the Synod of Bishops on the Family. We are in the very last days of the Synod meeting. Yesterday, the Synod Fathers received the first draft of the final document and elected new members who will prepare the next Synod. This morning, all the participants met in the Synod Hall with Pope Francis to propose any changes to the document before it goes up for a vote tomorrow. The drafting commission of 10 is in charge of writing the Relatio Finalis, this final document. All 10 of them have been personally appointed by Pope Francis, and here they are. There are 3 from the Synod's Secretariat, Cardinals Baldessari and Erdo, and Archbishop Forte. Then we have the Superior General of the Jesuits, representing all men and women religious. The other 6 members were chosen to represent the 5 continents, breaking up North and South America into 2 regions, so there are 2 representatives for the Americas. At today's press conference, 3 Synod Fathers spoke about these final stages of this year's Synod process. While they couldn't share details of the final document, which is up for vote tomorrow, they did highlight what has gone into creating it and how the Holy Father will use it. Let's listen.
It's an attempt to capture the very many viewpoints expressed by the Synodal Fathers. And several documents feed into this. The homily of the Holy Father at the introductory Mass, the presentation of the secretaries about the Synod itself, the Relator's presentation of the exercise that we gathered to undertake, and then the various interventions and viewpoints of the Synod Fathers that were expressed.
The document that we will vote on tomorrow is very important, but the whole synodal experience is very important. The Holy Father will not only receive our document, he has been listening all these 3 weeks to all of this, so he knows the accents, the difficult points. We may not have a consensus on everything, but he knows the weight of each argument.
Now I'd like to welcome to the set Edward Penton of the National Catholic Register. He's their Rome correspondent, and he's the expert on all things Vatican. Edward, welcome to the program.
Hi, Mary. Good to be back here.
What struck you about today's press conference? We've been watching this Synod and the last Synod, for it seems like a very, very long time at this point. And we have a little butterfly here joining us for the show. But what has struck you from today's press conference? Because we're in the final days, the final hours. What stood out?
Well, I think, as we just heard, that they're coming to an end now, and I think they're bringing together everything that's been discussed for these 3 weeks. It's interesting what the Cardinal from Quebec said, that the Pope's been listening. He has been listening. He's been in all the sessions, and he's been apparently writing away and taking a lot of notes about what's been going on. So that is the purpose of this Synod. It's really to give advice and counsel to the Holy Father so that he knows how to go forward, what document to produce at the end of it, if he wants to do that. We don't know for sure.
Yeah, we don't know. And I think, like you said, so many Synod Fathers have brought that up, that just having him there listening, I think that wherever they've come from in the world to be here, they'll go home knowing that the successor of Peter sat there and listened with his heart, truly with his heart about, and even if there was no final document, now Pope Francis knows what the bishops are thinking. They know of the mind, they know the suggestions they've made, but they will be voting on this final document tomorrow. We'll have to see the results of that. We don't know, right, that it'll be published at all tomorrow evening?
No, I mean, Father Lombardi, the Vatican spokesman, said at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon he's going to give some substantial material about it. Whether that's the code word for report, we don't know, but it might be
because
something.
he might not know.
No,
he's trying to use code as well.
Yes,
he's had a long 3 weeks.
He has.
Well, you wrote a book last year about how the last Synod went, and was there some maneuvering, some manipulation of last year's Synod? And now we've lived through this one. We're just at the final days. What is your impression now of this Synod?
Well, I think the so-called manipulation, the alleged manipulation of last year was quite upfront. I mean, there was an agenda being pushed, as Cardinal Napier said
very clearly,
and so that, to some extent, that seems to have carried on in that, you've got the final commission drawing up the report, who are made up of, the majority of whom are sort of pushing for this reform. So, there does seem to be a kind of push still for that. Also, I mean, this final report, just interestingly, that Cardinal Baldessari, the head of the Synod of Bishops, which is running this Synod, he said, we must have top secrecy. We don't want this document being
leaked.
In fact, he didn't even want to give it to the Synod Fathers last night to take away with them. So I mean, whether that is something to be said for that, I don't know. But this is something one has to look at sort of after the event to see, you know, whether there was sort of not very good, very edifying things going on, which might have been unjust.
Okay, because you're saying we're not done yet, so there's still maybe a lot to still be seen and how things are handled.
Yes,
so
yes.
we'll be watching that.
And there are a few doubts, you know, about this, the way this document has been handled, this final report. It's going to be given only in Italian, so those who aren't very conversant in Italian will have difficulty really understanding it. They were given a very short time to look at it, to make any final amendments. So
just overnight, right? I mean, basically, and who doesn't? If you don't understand Italian, that's tricky.
Yes.
But I remember one of the Synod Fathers in the presser today. I thought I heard him say, "Yes, yesterday we heard the final report." So I'm wondering if they heard it and had it translated simultaneously already yesterday, and then could take it home with them. This I'm not sure on.
That may have been. Certainly tomorrow morning they'll have it read to them through interpretations.
And they vote as they go.
They
right?
do, I believe, electronically,
Okay.
But I think the other query about this is that it's been written really by a team of 10 experts who aren't bishops. And of course that always is the case with drafting a report like this. You bring in experts to do it.
Yeah.
But they too are considered to be kind of reformers pushing an agenda. So there's another aspect there to be
right.
looked
It's
at.
like they have. Looks like they have final say over maybe what could be included in that document, but it sounds like the bishops are also having a very fair voice. So I think, like you say, Pope Francis sitting in that hall, I don't think anything's going to be a shock to him, you know. I think he sees the hearts and minds of the bishops that are there.
Yes.
I want to discuss the German group, because I thought if there was one group I would have liked to have sat in on, it was the German group, just because there was one, and there are a lot of interesting characters in that group.
Yes.
Cardinal Schönborn, a lot of great, you know, theological minds and well-formed. But there's Cardinal Kasper, Cardinal Mueller, Cardinal Marx. So talk about a lot of differing opinions. Describe how you see their presence and actions during the synod, because I thought they were fairly quiet.
They were fairly quiet. They were fairly even-handed in their reports. But at the end, of course, they tried to at least throw out there this proposal, this so-called Cardinal Kasper proposal of admitting remarried divorcees to Holy Communion. That was sort of put in a different guise in that report. Now, I think the argument that was allowed, and with Cardinal Mueller in the group, that he let that go forward, is because it was simply just to throw it out there. They weren't saying it was a proposal. But at the same time, you know, I wrote about this in the Register this week, that, you know, there's some real concerns about that, the way they're approaching it now as well. And so, again, you know, they're determined to sort of throw this out there and see what sticks.
I was surprised at the unanimity of the voting in that group, but I think somebody brought up the point, you know, because they know they're not proposing any new teaching or a new doctrine. They said, okay, at least we agree on this statement from our small group, and that's about all they agreed on.
Yes. But that unanimity argument is very interesting, because this whole synodality argument, because if they don't have unanimity, which is what you had in the Second Vatican Council, you had almost 100% agreeing on various documents. Because that's a sign that it's from the Holy Spirit. I mean, you really need to talk to a dogmatist to get this exactly right, but this is what I understand. And if you don't have that unanimity, then it's not really, you can say it's not really of the Holy Spirit. So if any of these proposals go through without unanimous backing, then they shouldn't really officially go forward.
And what about if they begin to be decided at the local level, the bishops' conferences?
Well, again, I mean, if they don't get the unanimous vote, then to send them off for the bishops to decide wouldn't really be on.
It wouldn't be on, as they say in England. I love that. I wanted to also bring up that Cardinal Pell, we had him on the show the other evening, and we thank him again for being on the show. We got so much wonderful feedback. He mentioned your book, and he said, he asked whether last year's synod was rigged or not, and he said some of the factors in your book still haven't been refuted to his knowledge. I mean, so he said you make some great points. They haven't been refuted. Do you think this has at least been a little bit more fair, honest, and transparent?
Yes, I mean, that was the whole purpose of the book, really. It was partly to help Catholics who were concerned about what happened last year to know what was going on, but also to try and help this process be a bit more fair and open and transparent. And hopefully it did have some effect in that, I don't know.
You think the Holy Father heard the concerns, like that letter written by the cardinals?
I've heard the letter sort of came out of those concerns, you know, from the interim report last year and all the controversy of that. So yes, I think they were keen that those concerns were recognised and acted upon. And I think, as Cardinal Napier said, he was happy that, you know, that he had that reassurance from the Holy Father that there'd be no kind of games being played this time, and
Yeah.
so I think that set them at ease for the rest.
Do you
of the
think they're
week.
getting along amongst themselves? They say they are. But I mean,
Yeah.
this is very fraternal moment. And of course, they're going to disagree. We've said it 100 times. The Catholic Church is family, and families are going to disagree. We understand
Exactly.
that. But, you know, I think the 13 who did send that letter sent it in good faith, you know, of good heart, and just say, hey, here's our concerns.
Well, they
And
sent it
the
in
Holy Father addressed it. So
Exactly,
what's the scandal, or what's the...
Yeah, I mean, they sent
mean-
it in the spirit of what the Pope
Yeah.
asked for, which was the spirit of openness and listening and
Yeah.
humility and all of that. So I don't think that was the problem. The problem was it was leaked.
That's the problem,
That was the
which
problem.
no one really wants to talk about. Who's leaking these
Who
things?
was leaking it?
Baddie
Because it was a
leaks.
private letter, you see.
Yeah.
And so that was the
And then ended up
concern.
not being the right letter. You know, it wasn't even the proper draft that had been sent, and some people's names were on it that hadn't. Anyway, so
Yes,
blah, blah, blah.
yes.
Enough of the synod drama, I guess.
Yes, yes.
But what are some things that may have surprised you at this synod? Just for, like, speaking for myself, I could say just being around the various bishops from various nations, the bishops from Africa. I was just
Yeah.
overwhelmed by their joy and their unity and their clarity of thought, and
Yes.
just so awed by that.
Yes, and I was talking to Cardinal Donato a couple of days ago, and he said that for the first time he's seen that, you know, the synods from the bishops from the developing world at a synod have felt they have been very happy to come forward and confident. They're not reticent as they have been in the past. They've really got their voice out there, which I think is a very positive thing about this.
Yeah.
And these small groups, I think the emphasis on those groups, which the Holy Father wanted to have a more intense debate, I think that's been very positive too. They've really appreciated that,
And they've had so many wonderful things to say. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
like talk about the future of the church. The churches are just, people are flowing out of the aisles. I mean,
Yeah.
they're great, increased vocations. So
Yeah.
they're doing something right. And I think their
They are.
message here to the Synod has been well received. And many Synod fathers have said just that.
yes,
You know?
yes. But that's not to say there aren't concerns, and all the
Oh, yeah,
concerns
no,
we
yeah,
know
no.
about. But there has
But they
been
have
some very
polygamy
positive
there. And yeah, they
things,
brought their
yeah.
problems facing families there that
Yeah.
we necessarily might not have.
Yes, yeah.
So that was one thing that definitely stood out. And so how do you think this is going to end? With a bang or with a whimper, as they say?
Who knows? I mean, my money would be on a bit of a whimper, really.
A whimper,
I think-
yeah, that's a general consensus.
Because I think the Holy Father hasn't. He said, look, you know, hasn't decided on a final document. He doesn't particularly like an apostolic exhortation, which is a document that traditionally comes at the end
Right.
of a synod. So there might not be a clear, definitive end to this. And then you've
Okay.
got the Year of Mercy, which means it might continue for another year.
We might
these
see
discussions.
this play out
Yeah.
during the Year of Mercy. All right,
Yeah.
Edward Penton, thank you so much for joining us. We have to take a break, but stay tuned for more live coverage from Rome. Welcome back to EWTN's coverage of the Synod on the Family live from Rome. I have the pleasure of welcoming as my next guest Archbishop Eamon Martin of Armagh, the Primate of All Ireland and President of the Irish Bishops' Conference. It's a lot of jobs. Your Excellency, welcome to the program.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for being with us. I know that you got to see the Relatio Finalis. Now, this is what we're all on the outside, so we all can't wait to see it or read it. But I know you can't talk about it. But what were your just general
Well, what we've
impressions?
seen so far
Yeah.
is the draft
Okay.
of the final text. We got that yesterday afternoon, and we were given an opportunity to study it and reflect on it overnight. And then this morning, at a very interesting session, the bishops were given an opportunity to comment on the draft document, and there were quite a number of comments. In fact, I would say maybe up to 50 interventions, and that would be from bishops from all over the world making comments and saying, look, we'd like this slightly changed or this amended. And I think that was a really helpful process. I had a number of issues with the particular document, which I said, I'd like to mention this, but then many of the bishops before me already mentioned it, so I didn't have to bring it up. And I did make one written submission to the writing group. They asked us if we had any particular modi or changes we would like to be made to submit them to them by lunchtime. So we've done that. So I suppose I'm really looking forward to seeing what the final text looks like and to get voting on it tomorrow.
Well, it sounds like if you had a concern and you saw it voiced by your brother bishops, it sounds like they were general concerns and needed to be addressed.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, concerns, we're talking here about a very small number of paragraphs. One of the things that I noticed was that I think without exception, every bishop who spoke thanked the writing committee. So I think it would be okay for me to say that there was a very general welcome for the document, a sense that we have really moved in the last few weeks, and that even the draft document, this is before the final changes, even the draft document was reflecting much of what we were saying in our interventions and in our small group discussions.
a lot of work for, what is it, 10 people on the commission?
Yeah,
to
but they've been
carry out?
working very hard, I believe,
Yeah.
all through the 3 weeks to prepare the document. So fair play.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that the final text will be a good one.
And you're discussing all of these things in front of Pope Francis. What has that been like?
It's an amazing thing. I'm in row G, which is 7 rows back, and there's the Holy Father. And I had to pinch myself in the first few days to say, am I really here? Am I really participating in this wonderful manifestation of the Church Universal? And to see the Holy Father, Peter there, we're with him, we're under him, and it's just very special, Mary.
Yeah, we keep hearing that phrase, synodality, this fraternal, being together and getting to meet with Peter, like you say, with Peter, under Peter, Pope Francis. But do you think it will be given to him, this document, handed over to him for his reflection? Do you think it accurately represents the consensus? I guess so. We were just saying these things.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it does. And I mean, if you have bishops from all over the world, from different cultures, from different pastoral experiences, then you're going to find that for some of them, some of the paragraphs may not sit comfortably with their particular culture. I think essentially this is a pastoral document rather than a teaching document. I personally don't think that this document is going to interfere with the teaching of the Church as we know it. I hope not. But I do think it's going to provide maybe a blueprint for pastoral initiatives and for pastoral action in the coming years.
Okay. You said in the press conference just the other day that even if there were no final document, this synod was definitely worthwhile.
I think so. I think, as you mentioned yourself, the experience of synodality, and I understand from bishops who've been to many other synods that this has been a synod with a difference. There's been far more interaction, far more discussion and debate and contribution, and therefore I'd like to think that the Holy Father has certainly moved us a step further towards the vision of synodality that was there way back 50 years ago.
Oh, so the 3 minutes hasn't limited. I think under John Paul was 8 minutes, and then it got down to about 5 minutes, where you're able to stand up and speak. But from what I've heard, no one complain about that.
No. I think most people are happy when if you can't say it in 3 minutes. I'm not sure if you can say it at all. But remember, that was only in the plenary sessions. The driving force in this synod was definitely the small groups. I had the honour of being moderator or chair of
English
one
Group
of the
C. I was just going to ask you about that.
groups.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was an amazing experience. First of all, when you say an English-speaking group, even when I went down to an English-speaking group, I had a sense of what that would mean. A few maybe English, Irish, Americans, Australians, Canadians. But actually, it turned out to be a truly global group with 18 nationalities from 5 continents. We had Indonesia, Kazakhstan, 2 Nigerian bishops. We had bishops from basically all over the world. And I actually believe our group was a microcosm of the synod itself.
How many people would have been in the group? 18 countries. How many people are sitting around that table?
We had 20 synod fathers. I think it was 20. And then we had another 7 with our auditors, experts, and fraternal delegates.
Well, that's a lot. Like you say, a microcosm. That is amazing. I haven't heard of any other group with that sort of makeup.
But it was really fantastic. Mind you, it was also presented many challenges, as you can imagine. Apart from the fact that even though we all spoke English, I'm not sure whether a Derry accent of my own is the same as the accent from South Sudan. But there were also those accents in terms of what we felt marriage and family was about, very much determined by our cultures, the modulations in marriage and the family as it is lived out in the reality of our own diocese.
You had to give, you studied each part of the Instrumentum Laboris, 1, 2, 3. And each time your small group would have to produce a reflection, I guess, on that.
That's correct.
How would you characterize your general contribution as a group, your small group?
Well, I have to say that I was very pleased when we see the draft final report to see that many of the suggestions for change, for development of the Instrumentum Laborious, sorry.
It was laborious.
Last night I said to somebody that that's what they were joking about at the Synod, that it was the Instrumentum Laborious. But, you know, it's wonderful to see the draft final document taking account of many of the ideas, positive ideas, and also some of the concerns that we had.
Oh, yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, you have a lot of jobs. I mean, Primate of all Ireland, President of the Bishops' Conference, and you come to Rome and you have to be the moderator of English Group C. So the Holy Father has a lot of trust in you, it sounds like.
It's a huge honor. It's just a wonderful privilege to be here.
Well, it's all going to come to an end in the Mass in St. Peter's Square on Sunday. Is the message clear to the bishops that doctrine regarding marriage and family is not something that's going to become, let's say, regionalized? So everyone's heading home now to their regions, but the doctrine is one. But let's come up with good creative pastoral practices.
Well, I have no sense. Yeah. I have no sense in the draft final document of this regionalizing influence. But of course, as you can imagine, we all have to go back to our Episcopal conferences, and we have to regionalize our pastoral action, and that really is determined by our own particular contexts and settings. But surely, isn't that the richness and diversity of the Catholic Church? Even though, of course, at the bottom of it all, we are one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church.
What do you think families in Ireland are facing? They're probably the same as ours, but the problems facing, lower birth rates or whatever it is that's the challenges when you go home.
Well, as you can imagine, Ireland has not been immune to the influences of what I have described as this tsunami of secularization and secularism that's been
usually comes from our side of the ocean, so I'm sorry.
Sweeping across. But I do think that family is still very highly valued in Ireland. I think there's a strong sense of family. I think young people still want to get married. I think there is still that sense that we'd like to be together for life. We'd like to have an exclusive partnership. And I know in the young people that I meet, there is a desire to find someone with whom you can spend your life and to whom you can be faithful. And therefore, even though we've had our challenges, as you know, earlier this year we had the same-sex marriage referendum, and that has certainly changed our outlook on marriage, and from the point of view of society, and from our point of view as church, it has made us all the more anxious to try to profess the good news, that prophetic message about marriage and the family that is dear to the heart of the Catholic Church.
And how do you give them hope? Because I think even just looking at it, sometimes even with my eyes of faith, I think, how can we turn this around? The secularism, the people maybe have given up on anything is for life anymore. How do we give them that hope again?
Look, by ourselves, we can do nothing.
Okay.
We have to rely on the strength and the grace and the power of the gospel and of Jesus. And I think that there has been a huge upturn in Eucharistic adoration in Ireland. There's a lot of revival in the recitation of the Holy Rosary. And I think all of these things will provide us with the kind of foundation. But then, of course, we have to get back to simple things like pastoral visitation of families, where they are at, going out there, meeting them, as Pope Francis is suggesting. We've a lot of work to do, but we're delighted because in Ireland, in 3 years' time, we're going to be hosting the World Meeting of the Families.
Oh, that's right.
We're following Philadelphia.
Yes.
Well, follow that. I don't think we'll be able to do that.
Archbishop Chaput can help you out.
But we're really looking forward to that. It'll be a great goal for us in our pastoral
How
action.
wonderful to go home and have that to plan for.
Exactly.
Oh,
I
boy.
think whatever comes out of the Synod will probably be like our manifesto in preparation for the World Meeting of Families.
We can't wait for that. Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining us on the program this evening.
Thank you, Mary.
We appreciate your input there.
Thank you.
And that's our show for this evening. We wish we could go on and on. Remember, for all the latest information on the Synod, visit our special Synod page on EWTN.com and follow us on Twitter at EWTN. Send us your questions and comments using that hashtag EWTN Synod. And we're covering this from all angles on EWTN News Nightly, Joan Lewis's blog and radio show, and the world over. For now, I'm Mary Shovelin. Good night from Rome.